welcome to Artist Trauma. This week we're doing Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill. All right, Chris. I chose this one just because supposedly it's his masterpiece. What did you think of it?
I think it probably fits our podcast theme in the most literal way. It's a very traumatic work in the very literal, in a non-philosophical sense, just in a very everyone's traumatized
Yeah, it's
all the time.
it definitely is the story of people who are just like there's just so much crap in their lives they just can't handle and are evading. Like there's just this atmosphere of self-deception that preponderates over this. It's marvelous.
Yeah,
Um,
it was great. So, and when we get to it, I actually made a character chart of past and present and inauthentic versus authentic. So we'll get to that later. Because this is a very so for everyone watching, this play is about an old actor who's not aging super well. His uh addict wife, who is addicted to opiates of what was it?
yeah, morphine. It's morphine.
Morphine. Morphine addict. And it begins with her last moment of being clean. And it's horrifying, or almost being clean. It's a really horrifying opening, I think, actually.
Yeah, and basically you learn more about them as you go along. Like the older son, Jamie, is he's a drunk and he sleeps with whores and so on. It's just kind of a waster, and he only stays in the business of acting because his father has connections. And the other son is much more intelligent. I mean, Jamie's smart too, but Edmund, he seems to have real potential, but he's looks like he's coming down with the consumption.
All the authentic ones that we're gonna have God kill, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so let's just get into it. Like we just start
Mhm.
off. We start off more or less with Tyrone. I mean that's the father. That's the way it's written out.
So Tyrone is a very Balzacian miser. He's there's a character, the father in the novel Eugenie Grandet. I can't speak French. I have no idea how to pronounce that
Yeah,
title. It's a miser of the same type, a penny pincher, if you will. And he's a classic penny pincher um to obscene extremes.
yeah. It really is. It's grotesque, his penny pinching, the way that he keeps buying up property from his real estate guy or whatever he is. And it's consistently bad deals apparently. Like he is just being scammed more or less
Mhm.
um by the guy, but he just can't help it. He wears these rags, which is a genuine embarrassment to his wife. And it's so particularly absurd given like the actorly way he carries himself. To be like just like these ripped up clothing. Um,
Yeah.
it's
One thing that Eugene O'Neill did at the opening also just to set the scene that I thought was a masterful stroke was having some of the characters characterized by their reading material, which you would never see.
yeah,
You'd never see it from the audience. You'd see it in a film version, but you wouldn't see, oh, there's Schopenhauer, these very, negative 19th century Debbie Downer philosophers. I mean, and then they mentioned one that's not a famous philosopher, but was a student in the Schopenhauerian school, um, who is even more of a downer. What's his name? But it doesn't matter. But it's a great opening to characterize. And then you have the full volumes of Shakespeare, which belong to the father, who basically treats Shakespeare as an ersatz Bible for his Catholicism.
yeah. Well, like that gets into later stuff of just
Yeah.
like one thing is that there's a difference of perspective that's conveyed between the sons and the father.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then there's space between the sons too, but like Edmund's the more pure one. Edmund has been heavily influenced by, I mean, just the whole list of just naturalist writers: Balzac, Zola, Stendhal, philosophers: Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Marx, Engels, plays: Ibsen, Shaw, Strindberg. Just all the best stuff. Um,
All the stuff we read.
yeah, yeah, like
Yeah. And his
and
dad calls it the, negative atheist reading or some
yeah,
nonsense.
yeah, and it's like, and his stuff is, is just the examples of romanticism with Dumas, Victor Hugo, Charles Levert. I don't actually heard of Charles Levert before, but Shakespeare. He's got all the classics of history like Gibbons. Um, it's it's interesting how well it's just he's such a faker, the father, like intellectually, as in
Right, because you and I would see obvious continuity and threads between those writers and things, but for him it's like a clear binary. Like Shakespeare is a Catholic, which is hilarious.
yes, Shakespeare's a good Catholic.
Shakespeare's a good Catholic, which is
Good
just like
Irish Catholic.
a good Irish Catholic. Yeah, which is, by the way, just a beautiful, masterful touch theatrically.
Yeah, as in it's just like it conveys the intellectual parochialism of the father.
Yeah.
But and the thing is, it's like it's horrifyingly tragic in a sense because it's also like the father, he plays this single role again and again. That's the thing that basically made his career and made his money. Um, and but he could have been a genuine Shakespearean actor. He could
And
have
he had
done
early
something
promise.
more, but
Yeah.
he basically squandered that because of this urgent prehensile desire for money. Now, one thing about it is there is a degree of sympathy about that. Of he had a miserable childhood, as is revealed later. Like he really had to, work in miserable child labor conditions.
It's a lot of this book strikes close to home for different reasons in terms of relatives of mine and people in my life who are like very similar to some of the characters. But weirdly, the dad has similar attitudes to my grandma. She died at like 96 years old, but she lived through the Great Depression. And there's these sort of like, oh, do we need that light on? And you're like, well, you just bought a car. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, but it's a different timing, a different way of being that the dad grows up in than his children.
Yeah, I mean he faced genuine poverty, and that's what made him into the. I feel like almost miser is too good of a word because what ends up happening later, and we'll talk about this more, but is like the son Edmund has consumption, and he can't bother to, and he's still like going to send him to the state institution, and when he's just to be a penny pincher. And when his son's like confronted about like, look, Dad, like, don't send me to this crappy state institution. Send me to an actual good place. You have the money, and he's like, okay, okay, son. Yeah, I know I'm kind of penny. I'll send you somewhere within reason. I'll send you anywhere you want
This
within.
institution where all the miners go, and you're like, what?
Yeah, I'll send you to the one that's like the private charity. Um,
And you're like, and also, oh, for everyone, this play is set in 19 teens, so a state institution.
yeah,
I think there's a little bit of a death sentence implication here. Like,
yeah, no, I think that now one thing I do want to just just mention this is this was not this was not published until after O'Neill died. And the reason why is because this is almost literally Eugene O'Neill in 1912. As in, the son Edmund is basically Eugene. He has all the same experiences, and his brother and parents are the same way, apparently. That's why he didn't want it released until 25 years after his death, but for legal reasons, it happened right after his death.
In either event, he wasn't there to know.
Yeah, which whatever.
But he was also, and Eugene O'Neill was also an alcoholic.
Yeah,
there's an intricacy in the experience.
But
I think
it's interesting how in this play it's like the assumption is that Edmund's going to die from the consumption.
Yeah.
That's the clear implication, but basically for Eugene, actually, it's like after he goes to the sanatorium, he gets better and he starts his career.
Do you think there's sort of like metaphorically speaking, two deaths that he's writing, like cutting off ties from his parents and starting anew in writing. I don't know enough about his writing. I don't know enough about his biography to make that statement, but
No, I mean,
um,
I don't know. I mean, the way I kind of read it is why he believes this part of his life in such a negative way is I feel it's almost like, yeah, it's kind of an accident that I survived that.
oh, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, things turned out well for me in the end. I got this brilliant career, but 9 times out of 10, I would have died in that little shithole my parents put me in. Um, so
Yeah. Of
that's my speculation is how he.
No, I think it's a good one. And I mean, obviously more facts will help, but in the end we do need to come up with our own creative interpretations of it since it is autobiographical. I so it was Halloween, and Anna and I watched the Peanuts Halloween special. And in that, one of the kids, I don't know, I think it's Linus, I forget, is really obsessed with this mythical being like the Pumpkin King who
Yeah,
doesn't
I
exist.
forgot. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that since I was
But
like,
like
yeah,
he's
now
like,
I can-
the great pumpkin is only going to show up if there's sincerity all around. And so like obviously the pumpkin doesn't come because it's not real. But like there he's sitting there and he looks around and he's kind of nervous and he goes, nothing but sincerity as far as the eye can see. Which is just, of course, I mean, Peanuts is pretty brilliant, but that was
yeah,
a
yeah. Well, I mean,
nothing is sincerity as far as the eye can see, right?
yeah, yeah. It's well, and that one, I mean, we really do need to realize that Halloween has been over commercialized. We need to return to the true spirit of Halloween. But
The true Pumpkin King.
yeah, like that sense. It's. I mean,
Well,
just that mixture of sincerity and insincerity that goes throughout the play. And I think Tyrone, like when he tells, like he comes off really odious in the play. Like not like absolutely hateful, but just because of the fact he's such a cheapskate. And like actually in this early scene, you
mhm.
actually see that insincerity in a nice little anecdote of I forget exactly how it worked. Basically, he has a tenant, Shanassi or whatever his name is. He's told about he has a tenant, who basically insulted and humiliated the local millionaire who happened to have a piece of land next to his. Um,
Mhm.
and the sons are just cracking up about this as they're telling him about it. It's like, like, oh God, like that, that old millionaire, that old jackass, like he really got his comeuppance, with what the guy said. And the father, he wants to laugh with them. Like he's starting to find it funny. He knows in a sense, like, yeah, like that guy got what he was coming to him. But he represses it because he's aware of that, like, oh, but there's like legal liabilities here and he's causing so much trouble for me and I'm gonna get tied up. Like, basically he starts, you can see the self-deception building up in the father because it's like, yeah, but I need the money. I don't want to get
Well,
tied up in some lawsuit that this is
no,
gonna bring about me.
I think you're right. I would say it slightly differently
Hmm?
because I think a big theme in this play all the way through is the ways in which characters slip out of their own speech. Like you and I, we're talking right now. I want to be honest. I want to tell you exactly what I have to say. But the moment some thing comes up and I'm like, okay, well, I can't say that. Okay, so I have to hedge, I have to suppress this. Suddenly I'm slipping into some other discourse, right? Like I'm slipping into some inauthentic way of speaking in terms of like a Sartre way of thinking about it. But like in an existentialist way, look at the number of ways in which people slip into inauthentic discourse. The drunkard's son keeps slipping into poetry, which is fascinating, right? Because it's sort of the truth, but it's not in his own language, right? Like he cannot speak. The only one who's actually talking by the end in his own language is the fucking consumptive kid. He's the only one who, Edmund. Edmund is owning his own discourse, whereas the mom has slipped into a total fantasy of the past. the dad moves back to the language of, miserly, like not spending, and the drunk kid has slipped into the discourse of just random romantic poets, and only Edmund isn't really doing that.
Well, let's see. With Jamie,
Yeah.
let's talk a little more about Jamie.
Yeah.
He's got he has the degree of
He's kind of all over the place, actually.
yeah, because on the one hand, like he is sort of like very friendly with his other with his brother.
Yeah.
Like he is sort of having fun, and you can I don't know if there's any kind of, I mean, experience exactly like forming him like, well, why is he such a bass? I guess one thing in the background is like, growing up, just on the road with his parents, like that rootless. Um,
Mhm.
that's seen as a negative experience, which sort of pushes him in that direction of being a drunk. I'd say from what I remember. But he's a real he's other character like the father is keeps harping away at like that son Jamie Edmund, he's just going to hurt and undercut you. And one thing
Mhm.
that Jamie eventually does admit, in like the final act, is yeah, I do actually envy you, Edmund. I actually was trying to undercut you with all the shit that I was telling you about how great horrors are and how you
Yeah.
really giving all the supposed facts of life.
Yeah.
um
And he's
you
got
know
that real clear-cut ambivalence, which is like sorry, not like our day-to-day usage, but in psychoanalysis, the like confluence of love and hate into one kind of ball of shit. Sort of like he's got this like, I love you, I hate you. I'm sorry, I got to admit, I hate you because you turned mom into an addict. But don't worry, I really love you. You're like, wow, man, you are all over the place.
Yeah, actually, that's probably
Perfect
another thing
shot.
that's probably like be a contributor is just the fact that his mother, he knew from a younger age that his mother was an addict. Edmund didn't know, at least explicitly, for until much later. Um,
Do you
yeah,
think that's
but there
one
is
place
that
in which
there is that because it's interesting of just like how it's like yeah, like in a sense he's very camaraderie of like yeah, like Edmund splits his money with me when he gets some for a drink, and I split it with him. Like it's friendly, but it is like there is the very explicit the hidden intention of like yeah, I want to pull him back into drunkenness, I want him to be as low as me. And of course there's the whole business about like, well, did Jamie, when he was a little boy, like 7 8 years old, basically kill the middle brother as a baby because he had chicken pox or something. And he went into the
like
baby's room.
measles, I think,
And
but something like this. Yeah.
measles. And went into the baby's room, and babies are susceptible to this sort of thing, and that's what the mother thinks. That's what the mother thinks, and I don't know. Given Jamie's character, I think it's pretty believable that he did that as a kid. Um,
Yeah, it's believable, and but it also is like, I mean, it's also a marker, a token of the fact that these people are incapable of moving forward.
yeah, yeah. There's
Like the moms keep slipping. The mom, both the mom and the dad, Mary and my God, what's his name? Uh, who's the dad? What's the dad's name?
Tyrone. That's
Tyrone and Mary. My God, it's like they keep slipping back. And what you learn, of course, is the great ideological truth, which is that neither of their pasts are the way they're constructing the past.
yeah. There's
You
well, the
know?
thing is that there's a mixture to it. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
One thing that you're honing in on here is the air of evasiveness and
Mm-hmm.
just hopelessness about it. Really, of they literally have this nice sit down, Tyrone and Jamie, I think, about like yeah, I am kind of a cheapskate. Like maybe I should send Edmund to somewhere better sanitarium, a better sanitarium, but within reason, which basically ends up being nothing. Like as he's admitting that he's being a cheapskate,
I
he
think that's
pulls
with
back.
Edmund. That's with Edmund himself.
What then happens is like then Jamie and Edmund are talking about it. Jamie's telling Edmund about it,
Oh,
and
yeah, that's
they're
right.
both they're both having that sort of cynical smile of, yeah, that's just like dad, and we're not going to do anything to change him on this. I mean, so it's like there's just that sense of there's even a moment of awareness of the problem, but not doing anything to change as a human being, just accepting it. And I mean, what's even more is just the sense of utter helplessness with regard to the mother of there's just this explicit atmosphere of evasion of what's going on with the mother, and like, yeah, we know she's really going out of her gourd on morphine tonight. This is a crazy bender. I've never seen her go so out of her mind.
Oh
uh
yeah, she's like pure death drive. I mean, she's like talking about the fog and the way of being nothing, and like
yeah,
she's totally gone.
but it's like they hear her upstairs just
Yeah.
doing God knows what, rummaging around, and they just don't even want to think about it. They don't even want to acknowledge it, because what the hell can they do? That's their essential attitude. Um, and the same, and like the fact of like Jamie of like he's just such a knotted up human being where it's like, yeah, I have this really viciously nihilistic attitude I have towards my brother, and I'm only gonna admit it when I'm stinking drunk. I never admit this to you when I'm sober.
Right. When he's also so where he could have plausible deniability, right? Because like he's wasted, so he could say, "Wow, that was a really tough night there, bud. Good luck at the sanitarium."
Yeah,
He's not even going to remember it, and so the truth comes out when it doesn't matter or when it's convenient, even for Jamie. Like Jamie probably knows. I mean, look, he's a drunk, so he's probably done this before, where I tell the truth, but only when I can't remember what I say, or there's some caveat to the truth coming out where it can't affect him when he's sober, or it's there's some plausible deniability or just general knavery with Jamie of dishonesty where he can't accept the truth, because the truth admitted when you're wasted can be helpful, sure, but only if it is reaffirmed when in the light of day, right? Like it doesn't, there's a sense of still being deceptive even though it's truthful, I think. I mean, my edition has a glass of whiskey on it, and I think that's a
yeah. Well,
perfect
it's well,
perfect
like
image,
whiskey. I mean, I read The Iceman Cometh earlier last week, or anyway, a little while ago, and it was and like if you think there's booze in this work, like you should see that one. Um,
I get honestly, I'm happy with it. It's great. It's a brilliant play. There is a period of American writers where they're basically all alcoholics, and it gets a little tiring. Tennessee Williams, F. Scott Fitzgerald, even later Raymond Carver, Cheever. They all, you
Hemingway.
know, yeah.
Uh,
So after a while, it gets a little like, all right, we get it. We
yeah,
get it.
that's booze just isn't that interesting, guys. Um,
It's really a period of American writing, because if you think about it, also even Malcolm Lowry, Under the Volcano, he claims to have written the novel of alcoholism. And again, these are all fantastic 20th century American authors. It's just after a certain point.
well, like it's interesting just the broader theme of it. I mean, at least when I think about the 1920s and the just broad period around there,
Mhm.
like the sort of thought you have is of disillusionment. Um, that's first off, just the I mean, that's a natural thing of like, yeah, we just had the First World War, like this whole idea of progress and future and optimism that we felt in the 19th century. Nope, nope, we just had ceaseless, pointless slaughter, for no good reason. And then like so there's that level of disillusionment, and then there's the disillusion specifically to America of prohibition of this is doing nothing. This is an utter failure as a policy. We're all lying to ourselves that this works in any fashion whatever. um
In general, I agree with you. Although there was a great study that like the number of alcoholic men did plummet during the time. There was there was a degree of success, even if it is not ethical. But yes, let's just keep
yeah,
going.
that's funny. That's funny. Okay, a partial success. um
It
It's
just
about
depends
as
on your values. I mean, if we were that addicted to booze, maybe we needed a cleanser.
um well, I guess we could say it's roughly as much of a success as our war on drugs. As in
Mm.
where our war on drugs is so successful that we can't even keep it out of prisons. Um
Our war on drugs is so successful. What was it? Well, there's a quote from Malaparte, which is like, we haven't really been fighting Hitler. We've been fighting the flies on the bodies, and the flies won the war.
yeah. Now I also want to say here.
That's the truth of the drug war: is the flies on the bodies won the war on drugs.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But
Mm.
on the point of just the whole. Okay, by the way, those are two like political events that like are related to disillusionment. I also think it's like a broader historical development of you couldn't have had the 1920s without, well, I mean, I don't know, just all the guys that our dear Edmund is reading of Zola and Balzac and Stendhal, like that like
Yeah.
the leads there.
Well, he's
Um,
also just in a really great Easter egg thing. You're getting Eugene O'Neill's version of his literary history as well, which is very nice. So
yeah, like that is it's. I remember when he won the Nobel Prize, like he did actually stress the influence of Strindberg on
it's
him.
on every page.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's like it's American Strindberg. This and I mean, I would say even from what I've read of Tennessee Williams, like we really in America took Strindberg in
Well,
a large way.
yeah, I'm not. I'll have to come back to that.
Yeah.
When I when I think about Strindberg, it's a little bit more. I guess one problem for me is Strindberg feels a little more. He has more decorum. It's not all sort of. It's not so pathetic in a certain way. I'm not using it to like totally degrade O'Neill's characters, but like it's
Well, how about a Greek word? How about bathos? Eugene O'Neill is more pathetic, weepy, over the top, emotion, unbridled emotion.
well, no, there's definitely the unbridled emotion, but I mean like the degree of
Yeah.
sordidness. Um, Strindberg is a little more. There's a little more dignity to his people, and they're a little more aware of. They're not as evasive. Um,
It's like American Strindberg. Oh yes, the formal elements, the emotion, just take away some dignity and you get the American viewpoint. I don't believe that. Sorry, I just think it's just funny. That's
yeah, no, I
but
got.
O'Neill is there. I mean, there is a sense of this being a long day's journey into death, and that the more, night being death and the day being life, just kind of the old, regular symbolism, long day's journey into night. So you notice that like other people, I'm kind of switching back to the play now. You notice how like other people slowly don't matter as the play goes on, and by the end it's kind of like this like world shrinking down as the play goes on, I feel like.
Yeah, there is a. I mean, one thing it is a. I mean, it is a psychological journey. You're getting much more into. Well, first off, you don't even know. Like for a while, you don't even know that the mother is an addict. Just she's kind of recovering from something vaguely, and then you don't know exactly what her addiction is for a while, and finally you get to see the more like just in terms of that, but like every character is that way of like you're getting more of these levels of psychological depth as you're proceeding, and all plays are that way. All plays should kind of tell you much more about the character as they go on, but in this play it's particularly pronounced. It's much more like, and one thing about this play is very little happens ultimately. Like the only thing that really happens, we could say, is the mother and relapses, and and they decide that Edmund should go to a bad sanatorium. Like that, those are the only two events. in terms of like practical back and
Like
forth.
just on the literal level
Yeah,
of
on the literal level. As in on the
literal.
spiritual level, it's like, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on, but in terms of the cash value of all of this talking, that's what comes out of it. That's not a criticism. I'm just putting it out there. Like this is a much more
Well, yeah,
introspective
no,
work.
I think you're right, but I think it becomes introspective. Like external events are present at the beginning. You have the other properties, you have these other things, and by the end, it's like a morbid repetition circle of just sort of death spiral.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
actually one thing. Actually, this is actually a difference with Strindberg. Is Strindberg has basically some bad shit go down.
Yeah.
Like he will have like vicious conflicts. There are like there is a development in a way that there isn't here. And here, I was I won't say surprised, but I was at least at least it stuck out to me that the mother doesn't overdose at the end. A part of me was feeling like, oh, that's what's going to happen here, right? Like, she's talking about it. She's talking about like sometimes I wish I just gave myself too much that I would die. Sometimes I don't know how much it takes to get me properly going when I'm on. She talks about this. And you
Yeah,
think like,
I
okay,
mean, like,
that's going to be the discovery. It's like, oh yeah, she's
yeah,
overdosed. But that doesn't happen. All you're ending on is, yeah, okay, like she's definitely pushed farther than she normally does, but that's not it. Um,
well, I think that okay, there's in John Green, the novelist's um young adult novel Looking for Alaska, there's an edgy girl, I forget her name, but she smokes cigarettes, and this is going to sound super cheesy, but it actually worked well in the book. It was like she's smoking and the kid's like, oh, why do you smoke? And she's like, well, other people like to smoke to get higher, for pleasure, or whatever, all the things people do substances for. And she goes, I smoke to die. And that's this play, is the substances are not enjoyment. She especially most crystallized with the mom, like the purpose of substances is to bring her away from the world, you know so even though she doesn't literally die, like at the end she's just totally hallucinating in the past, like she's spiritually gone. She's not in the present, so to speak.
yeah, it's let's see, I'm trying. Yeah, what is the role of the vices of the characters? I mean, how do we? I mean, with the father, like his predominant vice is his
Whiskey.
um miserliness, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
Sorry,
it's
yeah.
like he's not. That has a kind of. It's more of just an itch, It's more of just like I just need a hit of more land, I just need a bit more. Like I can't like invest money in this other thing. I can't spend money on like a nice driver and so on and so forth. There's that quality which it's a kind of helplessness. It's a kind. I mean, there's a certain way in which there's an analogy to addiction, but it's different. It's not quite wiping you out. It's more just, but there is a sense of like you're almost like lowering your mental range. You're just sort of obsessed with this one quantity of money, which it's important to care about money. You should very much care about money, but you need a context. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like, i
um,
I think there's a difference between caring about money and caring for money, like holding the dollar bills and stroking them as if it was a dog.
yeah, it's yeah. I
It's a
mean,
different
as in
thing.
that he's taking it into a pathological direction, which uh well, with the mother, it's like with the drug addiction, with the morphine, it's like she is just escaping into this like fantasy world, and like that's one thing that's horrifying. As in,
Mhm.
it horrify me when I read it, but I know it'd be horrifying if I saw this. Is just the sort of inhuman withdrawal, like the withdrawal of her personality, and how it's sort of like as she takes more morphine through the course of the play, there'll be sort of moments of like, oh yeah, she's like talking like a regular human being. But then she'll withdraw into this sort of fantastic, unreal personality. It's scary. It's scary when that happens because it's like it's not mom anymore.
Yeah, and I almost texted halfway through this play, and I was like, man, I can't. Too close to home. I've had things around me in my life with people where it's like, well, there's that character. Oh yeah, I've lived through that.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm so
through
sorry, man.
that.
I'm so fucking
And
sorry.
so it was particularly with the character of the mother, like that's I've someone in my life, uh, yes, slipped, and the way else it sounds like kind of weird to say it this way, but they slipped fully out of their own discourse and sort of just into this other scene, other scene. And I also think that like the mom talks about fog. First of all, fog is not just a through line. Like it's a through line, obviously, for each character, but fog is like really an important thing we're gonna have to talk about this
Yeah,
play.
like that is a
You
very
know?
expressive metaphor or symbol that is carried throughout the play. Like the fog, like that's New England's area in the coast, so I guess there's fog, and you hear fog horns from the lighthouse. And that
So for you,
is
what is it? Is it a symbol of the same thing for each character, or is it a symbol of a different thing for different characters?
um
Obviously, there's a unifying element to it, but like Edmund deals with the fog as a gateway to the sea, and he talks about that great feeling in the ocean and the spray and the water. Whereas the mom talks about the fog as like Peter Pan syndrome, where like I'm gonna get back to this lost fantastic object that doesn't exist, of course.
yeah, I would say that they're fundamentally different for them, as in I don't even think like they, I mean, for me, like Edmund talks about certain religious experiences he has, not actual religion, but just like a overwhelming sense of tranquility.
What Bataille would call a limit experience, or you could say an experience of the sublime. Really
Yeah,
fully out of yourself in the
yeah,
in
like
the.
he has these moments, and I think just the fog there is it's used in a very different, in a fundamentally different capacity, than what happens with the mother. Where
Yeah,
the as for the
yeah,
mother, it's like no, like you're in this atmosphere. It's just this fact of yeah, she's withdrawing into that Peter Pan fantasy of like, oh, I remember when I was a girl, and oh, like how I wished I could have been a
none.
nun, and how I remember playing the music so well, and so on and so forth. It's like
This is like deeply not helpful for analyzing this play, but I did find it very funny that like her fantasy sucked so much. Like don't get me wrong, everyone has their own fantasy when they slip into the Peter Pan syndrome, but it's funny. It's like, so you fantasize, and it's real now. Okay, bringing it back into literary world, there, the fantasy of being a nun is a fantasy of exclusion, radical separation from the world, right? Like she wants to go back so that she can not be a part of life from the beginning in a certain sense.
yeah,
Is
it's
that how you're reading it? I'm not sure if I'm right on
okay.
that.
This is a very interesting point to bring up of like how exactly did what exactly are we make of the specifics of the nun fantasy? Um, I kind of take it as okay. First off, there's one aspect of her fantasy that is like much more normal and human. Of like she wanted to be a concert pianist. That was ultimately, her husband says, Tyrone says, like, yeah, she wasn't that great of a musician. Okay, she couldn't have made that, but like, that's a much more natural fantasy to have.
Yeah, like I wanted to be a doctor, like I want, be somebody.
Yeah,
Wanting to be a nun, I think, is fundamentally
I think,
just
I think,
different.
I think, I think the nun. I don't know what it is for certain kinds of Catholic women.
Yeah.
That fantasy. I imagine what it is. There's a certain glamour in their minds of, oh, I'm living this very simple and soulful life in devotion to Jesus Christ. And I hear And like, and you're going to, well, you're going to school and you're being taught by these nuns, and like you like a lot of them, and you admire their like emotional maturity, and there's something infectious about the pomp of Catholicism, that like makes it kind of endearing. So like for us, we find that like, what the fuck do you want this? Like that's disgusting. Like that just sounds so hollow and boring. But I think
Yeah.
I think for an actual Catholic girl of a certain kind, like there is a certain glamour to that. In the same way, there'd be a glamour to being
Yeah.
a concert pianist. At least that's my hypothesis. I don't know
Yeah, I
Catholic
also
well enough to say that.
I think you're right. I think I'm hitting on the exclusion too much. Even giving the exclusion part of it, if you think about it, there's an important difference in that in her current state, she's excluding herself through sin in a Catholic sense, whereas in the in a radical absorption in the Catholic Church, it would be done without sin.
I
I
mean,
feel like
I'm gonna say like there's a certain like degree of true like
Mhm.
I do think it is relevant what you're saying. Of there is a sense of, at least to me, the feeling when she's talking about being a nun of like, oh God, and then I wouldn't have had all this ugliness, in my life almost. Like it wouldn't have, I would have been safe away from there. But like the way that Tyrone shoots down both of her dreams and says like, yeah, she couldn't have been a concert pianist because she just wasn't that great, and she could have never been a nun because she was just too worldly a woman. Let's be frank. Um, and basically, the way both of them those are shot down is as she just didn't have the chops. And I,
Yeah, but the cruelty is sort of like, so I'm not a professor. Okay, like in my example, so I'm not a professor of literature, but I love books, so I'm working at a bookstore. Like you don't like. There's a sense in which you have to give up on your dreams of whatever being God is going to be as a kid, but like there is a cruelty to his foreclosure of her future. I think still in some way, even if he's right, like she just wasn't that good. Like I don't know, there still could have been some way he helped her self actualize in some way. I think.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's getting into. There's a part of it that when he's talking about it, I take that as like, yeah, he's being very just straightforward, realistic about it. Of
Right.
but there is a pro. One thing is that there is a broader context with Tyrone of he did not give her what she wanted, what she really needed in the marriage, as in she
Mm-hmm.
wanted a home. She didn't want to be in some crappy hotel for every one night stand that they
Oh
used.
my god, I forgot. We should
Um,
have been talking about this element from the beginning. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah, I'm like, that's right. We're talking about these childhood dreams, but her concrete in the now desire is a home that can't be provided for. Yes, sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
we got to
and
bring it to this level.
there's multiple ways he fails at that. Of it's like first off, he doesn't give her a home. He gives her this crappy summer cottage, that is run down with crummy servants that are the worst ones because he's just that's what he pays for. And he buys he buys a chauffeur, but it's this crummy mechanic and not someone who's been one before, and he's probably scamming them in various ways. And it's
Yeah,
just, and he can't even buy good clothing for himself, which is an embarrassment to her. And it's like just all of that is really hurtful, and like the worst way that that hurts her,
yeah,
the most damning way that it hurts her is when he writes to her that he missed her so much, and she eventually like succumbs and goes out to there, even though she's nursing her second child, Eugene. um and that she feels is like, yeah, because I left Eugene, that resulted in my first son, Jamie, killing him,
yeah.
through the an infection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that wouldn't have happened, and it's in part because of my husband that that happened. And so it's like you're right to like criticize him of like, yeah, like, yeah, okay, you see through these other problems in her fantasies, Tyrone, but you didn't do anything to actualize her, to give her the fundamental needs of motherhood that she wanted to pursue.
Like instead of a pianist career, a home building situation where you can make it homey.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, it's
you
like
know,
that's a serious thing. And like, okay, like we could talk about like, okay, she could continue like doing music or something and you encourage that. But that's like such a side thing at that
no,
point.
it's the home. I'm sorry, I forgot. It gets displaced. It's the home that becomes the main value. And because she's not getting that home, one one result of that is the lapse into these former fantasies, which aren't even really current fantasies. They're not even
Yeah,
operative.
they're very literal. I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned it's some kind of opioid, and it's like, yeah, these are literal pipe dreams or needle dreams.
Needle dreams. Yeah, no, they are because they're like, oh, if I were a firefighter, what? Chris, it's like you never wanted to be a firefighter. And you're like, oh yeah, where did that fantasy come from? And it's
it's,
it's a
it's
sort of desperation maneuver, really.
yeah. I mean, like my God. I mean, it's. But let's turn a little bit more to the sons
Yeah.
because it's a we already talked a bit about them about Jamie and Edmund, but what is your basic feeling about Jamie? Like, just when you think of him, like if this was a person in your life, what is your reaction to him?
I mean, to quote Judge Judy, run for the hills. I mean, you're never gonna get anywhere. You're gonna get killed by him. He's one of those guys who gets drunk and murders his wife and friends. But I find him to be a great read because he's so chaotic that in the last act he's all over the place. And so he's very interesting, and he also has a lot of descriptors. Eugene O'Neill is a heavy-handed descriptive writer. We've read some playwrights that don't include a lot, and he includes a lot of how
Yeah,
you should
which
do
which
it.
I very much approve. I am very
Yeah.
happy he makes this play this script into proper literature. Um
Well, yeah, like okay, so Jamie, the moment of break between him and Edmund near the end is he goes, in a cruel, sneering tone with hatred in it. Where's the hophead? Gone to sleep?
and
And
his
it's like,
own mother. Um
his own mother. Edmund jerks as if he'd been struck. There's a tense silence. Then in a burst of rage, Edmund goes, rightfully, you dirty bastard, and strikes him because it's like what one thing I think is this.
and then
Here's
he
my thought.
keeps doing that. Jamie keeps
He's doing
doing that.
that.
Like he does it several times, even though he's like, "Yeah, you're right to call me out on that." And then 5 minutes later, he's doing that again.
I think the problem with Jamie is he's in the possession of the truth, but not in the possession of authenticity. So like he uses the truth as a weapon, not as a helping hand
Yeah,
in the family unity. It's,
yeah.
it's a the truth is a weapon for him,
Yeah,
right?
and I very actually it's funny. Like I was just like searching for things I had like highlighted, and this is perfect. Mary saying bitterly about Jamie because he's always sneering at someone else, always looking for the worst weakness in everyone. Then with a strange abrupt change to a detached impersonal tone. But I suppose life has made him like that, and he can't help it. None of us can help the things life has done to us. They're done before you realize it, and once they've done, they make you do other things until at last everything comes between you and what you'd like to be, and you've lost your true self forever. Okay, that last bit. Okay, by the way, I just have to say this reminds me of a joke I came up with the other day
Yeah, yeah.
of you know, it's funny how you forget everything you value and have nothing left in the end.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like it's so there's a quote, I think it's from Marx, I forget, but it's like first is tragedy, then is farce. There's moments where the mom, you're like, oh, I feel so bad for her. And then there's moments where you're just like, okay. That's,
Yeah,
that's
but,
one of those moments where
the
she's
primary thing is like Jamie's just kind of mean. Like he's always
yeah.
sneering at people. He's always finding the worst weakness, and it's like he's smart. Like he
So
quotes
he has to know the truth in order to do that.
what?
He has to know the truth of the other's weakness. He has to know what that would be. So he's very astute, as he's very smart.
Yeah,
But instead of the way in which Edmund is trying to go about his business with the truth. I think Edmund fails at the truth with his mother sometimes, right? Like in terms of he misses that he suppresses that truth that she's like an addict for a while. But then he does accept it. He does accept it. And Edmund really is the only one of these four characters who has anything like an authentic version of truth in the world. Not just truth as facts, but truth as a tool that you can use to get out, to clear the air,
Yeah,
to
like
bring things forward.
yeah, like the father is too just insincere. He just doesn't. I mean, with all his Victor Hugo, as he would have, as probably O'Neill would put it. I have a better view of Victor Hugo, but I do have problems with him too. Um, but he's too insincere. Mary is she's an addict. Jamie is a sneering drunk. Edmund is the only character who's really got a sense of a positive value that he can achieve. And like, he goes on all those like, travels when he's young, on boats and so on. Like, and he has these really profound emotional experiences, and he's able to convey them in this very articulate, I mean, mildly inchoate, but articulate,
Well,
deep
he's
felt
drunk.
fact.
Yeah, but also they're personal.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with the father's sense of himself is, so he's on a stage performing for others, and there's sort of like a misrecognition in his moments. Like his greatest moments are performing for others, whereas the son's greatest moments are alone. And I'm not saying one or the other's better, but I think that it transforms for the father.
I mean, I would say it's not. I wouldn't read it that way. Of like, because the sincere moments in Tyrone's life is it like the one really glowing sincere moment is he's playing Shakespeare with some other great actor, and he's told, like, yeah, I couldn't have done it that well. That's what the older actor says, and it's like,
Mhm.
and the feeling of like, yeah, I really wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. It's a shame I'm such a skinflint that I had to do these cheap performances again and again. And I just didn't have the courage to stick with real art. So
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything wrong with the acting in a sense. It's more just he's abused the acting.
well,
Uh,
the thing that he views infects his acting is his miserliness, right? Like the need for the security of finances gets him into that role where he's making all this money every year, um, consistently, but he says he would have given up all the money to follow the more Shakespearean, true to life desire that he had. Basically, the father, in the Lacan Seminar 7 sense, gives ground relative to his desire in his own view. He gives way. He doesn't follow the path of not making as much money, but doing Shakespeare, and instead lets the money troubles cause him to do this role. Now, I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm just
he
saying that's
would
the way.
never, and if he went back in the past, he would have made all the same decisions.
Right. That's why I'm not saying like he's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's how he views his past.
Yeah, which is it's accurate. It's accurate that like, yeah, I'm a skinflint, and that's why I did this. But there's an obvious sense of, yeah, he'd never recognize it, or he would never change. I guess that's actually okay. There's sort of a difference here, actually, in terms of the level of insincerity of Tyrone versus the other character, versus like Jamie. Is Tyrone? He admits, yeah, I'm a skinflint, and then he keeps going on and doing skinflint things. Jamie, at least he has sort of like, yeah, in this moment, I'm going to acknowledge, yeah, she isn't different. It really isn't different. It was like, it's like, yeah, hey, I'm a bastard to you, Edmund, and I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep bastarding at you. Like, I'm going to keep undercutting you, like, in whatever way I can. Be like, I envy you, like hell.
So it's a good time to bring up my graph about authentic versus
All right,
inauthentic,
go
past
for
versus
it. Go
present.
for it.
So for Mary, I have a little bit of question about the authenticity of her past, but I'm just going to give it to her that I'm going to give her authentic past, inauthentic present. I'm going to give Tyrone authentic past, inauthentic present. Jamie, I just give inauthentic past and inauthentic present. And then Edmund, I gave authentic past and authentic present. And I don't know if I'm right. I just
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to
that's
sum
an
it up.
interesting two by two you got there.
It's
I
way
would
too simplistic. I just kind of had fun doing it, really.
yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I would say that I would say that when she was a girl, the desires she had were naive but sincere. They, she was not in the position to realize, yeah, I'm really not cut out to be a nun. I'm really not cut out to be a musician. But, for a 16-year-old, those are reasonable conclusions to come to.
Also, she wouldn't have. I think the play is telling us that she did truly fall in love with Tyrone.
Yeah.
That wasn't like a fake event or some nonsense. Like that was real.
Yeah, and
Like,
she was willing to put up with crap for that. Of like, she
yeah,
being an actor was a lowly thing back then, and she got cut from her social circles because of that.
yeah, and you do that, for love. Like unauthentic. It was purely like those seem like authentic gestures, and the problem is they come back to bite her over time.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'd say Tyrone. Like, yeah, he had a sincere past. Also, he was trying to make it, but he sold out. He's a sellout, basically. That's his problem.
So
Uh,
would you say that's the moment he flipped?
yeah. The thing is,
Knowing that we're kind of like obviously some oversimplifying a little, just to kind of help help us kind
yeah,
of.
I mean, that would be like the thing that like he was trying to become an actual actor, and that was the temptation that was too much for him. Given his background, as the play would put it. Um, but he's but that's more or less the moment of if he had just been a well, of course you have to wonder, even if he had like stuck to being an actor, would he have still been a skinflint in some way? um maybe not. Like, maybe the influence of Shakespeare and being a real artist would have expanded his soul enough to like realize his priorities.
Do you
um
think it means anything that Shakespeare is a good Catholic, or are we just kind of having fun?
oh well, that was well, that's basically, that tells you what you need to know about the intellectual standards of the father. As in, he's conventional. He's not.
Yeah,
He
you
doesn't.
said parochial, right? Like,
Yeah,
I think
parochial.
that's yeah, I think that's true.
Like, he had something deeper in him. He could have expanded out and been more, but no, he's just a good Catholic, which is a good Irish Catholic, which is to say, a real bastard. Uh,
I was gonna say like the most authentic Irish Catholic is like an alcoholic who neglects his wife or something that's horrible. But like I think that Eugene O'Neill would make that joke himself.
yeah, just just talking about potatoes, beating his wife, and Protestants. Um,
Yeah, it's the there's the band the Leuven Brothers who sang really great Christian folk music, and they were a great band, but they were like born again evangelicals, and you're like, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, one of them was an alcoholic, and the other went to jail for abuse, and you're like, ah, of course.
Jesus
There it
Christ.
is. All right, moving back. Do you think that the one character I think I'm going to argue that Edmund is the most sincere the whole time. And what I mean by that very specifically is I feel that his discourse is his own. His opinions are his own. He is speaking in his own voice. He's not slipping into fantasy. He's not being deluded. I think he still does occasionally, but I do think that Edmund's the most, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
real.
yeah. He's the only person in the play who you don't run from, more or less. Like
Yeah.
Jamie is full blown, like this man will actively undercut you. Tyrone is he probably short shrift you in some way, scam you in some way if you were financially involved with him. Um,
Yeah.
the mother, well, she's an addict. That's
You're
all.
not going to notice she's there. You'll just hear the pitter patter of little needles,
Yeah.
which is
And
very sad, by the way. I mean,
also,
obviously,
but Edmund, like he could be a real person, and well, it is autobiographical. It is O'Neill essentially.
I think
Um,
that like the choice of thinkers that he brings up is, having read not all of Schopenhauer, but a lot of Schopenhauer's essays and a lot of Nietzsche, Nietzsche fashioned himself as related to the Stoics in a sense of grounded in reality and a lot colloquially both Schopenhauer and Nietzsche are casted as sort of negative, whereas there's an island of difference between Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. I think that the reason for the choice of some of these thinkers is an idea that, just colloquially and not even worrying about getting into their philosophies, the truth is worth its negativity. It's worth
yeah, like
being
that that
realistic.
that's that is a consistent. I mean, yeah, that's the dichotomy that is coming up. There is, I mean, Victor Hugo, bless his soul, but Victor Hugo, he to me, I view him as a magnificent drunk. Like he's really skillful at writing. Like he
Yeah.
can write beautifully and intensely, but he just bloviates so much. He's so repetitive, and so many of his characters just do not live. And I almost feel like he has the honesty to acknowledge some of them just are not real characters.
Yeah.
And there's this quality of fantasy about him. This is not a man who's desperately interested in the facts of life. Who is intoxicated by his own eloquence in a real way.
Would you say?
But okay, but I just want to contrast
Yeah,
that
yeah. Keep going. Sorry, you're making a great
compared to
point.
all these other guys, but compared to Balzac and Stendhal and Zola, it's like these are people who really like they're looking at the seamier side of life. They're talking about things like that you go into like menstruation or something like that happens in a Zola novel. It's a plot point, but
Yeah, or incest in another Zola novel.
yeah, and or, that's an Ibsen too. Um, is
Yeah,
it?
we love our incest.
Yeah, like it's almost as good as venereal disease.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
uh, but it's like there is this like that is the difference there, and it's like there is this attempt at like confronting facts that these other ones. Now I don't want to. Since I'm portraying this in an overly negative way about Hugo, I do think he is confronting things. Like he does talk about
Right.
prostitution. Like he does deal with a lot of these issues.
Right. And let's not even bring in Shakespeare into this dichotomy because it's from a different century and it just doesn't make sense with our binary we've set up here. I mean, the Shakespeare of Much Ado About Nothing, the same man wrote Hamlet. It's not so easy to vector in the way we're doing with Shakespeare.
Yeah. So like I don't.
Uh,
Yeah. So
But I
it's
think
more
there's a
complicated,
romantic.
but that's the kind of thing that's going on there. And like, but one thing
Yeah,
that's interesting, I think the much more interesting dichotomy actually though is between Jamie and Edmund, uh,
yeah,
because Edmund, he's really interested in reality. That's why he goes on those voyages. That's what he's trying to do with his poetry, like expressing real experiences he's had.
right.
But Jamie is, I mean, he explicitly says, "I've tried to give you the straight dope on life, but it was bull." Like just the fact of like, yeah, I told you like this is what I try to glamorize prostitution and drunkenness and all these other things for you. There really are just ugly, tedious things. Not worth
But
it.
that's not a truth that like Edmund knows all these things. He's working with the same material that here's maybe the thought. Edmund is working with very similar material to Jamie, and they come to very different standpoints on life.
Yeah, as in well, basically, you want to say about Jamie is he's a pseudo realist. You know, he's pretending that the thing that he's like, oh, you know, like since he's almost a teenager kind of realist of like, oh, all those dirty sordid things. Well, let me, you know, like those are actually really good things. Like, no, no, they really aren't.
Well, no, it's a categorical view of perversion, meaning like I know very well that these are this, and yet I'm going to still enjoy and partake, even though I intellectually also know that they're not meaningful at all. There's
Well,
a sort of
I think
having his cake and
I
eating
think
it,
there is a
right?
sense in which he when he's drunk enough, he
Mm-hmm.
knows, yeah, these are terrible things. These are awful, unpleasant, humiliating things. Um,
It's like he's nice unconsciously,
he's
or
this,
like or something like or
yeah, but
how do
like
we put that?
I
Let's put
do
that something
feel
more
like
real.
I do feel that there is a it's almost this sentimental depravity, and like that's
Mm.
why he keeps quoting Swinburne, you know, like throughout it about like, you know, about referring to, I forget the exact poem, but it's, you know, it's saying like, you know, like, oh, you know, like I may sleep with whores, but I keep but I'm faithful to my lost love in my own way. You know, like that's a very sentimental depravity being depicted there of like, yeah, okay, like prostitution, like, you know, there's still this sort of melancholic quality to it. No, not in fact. And like when he's drunk he realizes, yeah, that's fake, but in reality he's but like when he's more sober it's like he is lying to himself about that.
There's an interesting dichotomy, bringing in the fog trope, where it's very richly talked about when he gets home being drunk. He talks about, wow, we really need like a fog, we need a fog light out here or whatever. We need, like, the fog is so thick. I think that the fog is fantasy, or something. Like I think it is for everyone, whatever that is for them,
No, I'm not
or
gonna take it
something.
that I'm not gonna take it that much. I would say that for the mother it's symbolic, and I say it adds a, well, I get an almost literal atmosphere to the play. Um, of just the sense of you're in this New England atmosphere. But yeah, there's all this fog everywhere, and that's the feeling you get with her. She's the only one who I think really talks about fog in a serious way. Like you
No, there
don't.
was a comment from the doesn't
I know Edmund like mentions it briefly, but I think for him it's
he
like,
says like we're the fog people or something,
oh,
doesn't
oh
he?
Christ, I forgot that.
And doesn't
Forgot
that really
that.
mean
Okay, you win,
true?
you win, you win. Yeah,
We're all in a bunch of delusional
yeah,
fantasies
that's
here.
right. No, you win, you win, you win, Chris.
Was it? But I don't remember if it was Edmund or the mom, or I think it was
Doesn't
Edmund,
matter
because
who. Yeah, it doesn't matter who.
whoever says that is basically saying we're the bog people, meaning we're all in our own shit,
Yeah.
and we've lost sight of, well, reality, right? Like we've lost sight of cutting, whatever that is for people, whether it's sobriety or being, or accepting the fact that Edmund has consumption, just not reality denying, just like, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah, there's this,
you know,
and the thing is that about it is there is this sense of, even if they were to be getting at the facts, it wouldn't have an impact on their lives. As in, okay, so we admit that mom's an addict. What do we do about it? There's really nothing to do about it, you know.
let's drink. I
It's like
guess is what
that's all we really got to do here. I mean, like the father
yeah.
does acknowledge that he's a skinflint. What does he? And in the same sentence, in the same breath, he says like, "Oh yeah, but you know, I'm still sending you to this cheap sanitarium." Um, you know, the same thing with everybody. It's like, yeah, I mean, like Edmund is. I'd say Edmund doesn't have illusions, more or less. His only problem is that,
That being almost dead thing.
yeah, I mean
No,
it's,
being sick. He's sick.
yeah, he's sick, and it's what I want to say about in that connection of his consumption. I mean, the dishonesty that sort of comes up is just this sort of fatalism. Like when he's talking with Jamie, and he's just like, yeah, like anywhere within reason. It's like, well, we know what within reason means, and they're both just resigned to the fact. It's like there's no sense of, okay, we really got to try to twist Dad's arm on this. Who knows if you could twist Dad's arm into actually sending him somewhere nice. Um, and God knows like what it looked like, because like the few times the father does spend money on things, it's how does okay, just one thing that's really delicious about his Tyrone's miserliness is it doesn't even make him wealthier. It actively undercuts the wealth he has. He doesn't buy good real estate and like slowly expanding his property to like be higher net worth. No, he's getting crappy pieces of property from somebody who knows he's an easy pigeon. He's getting
Yeah.
like when he like the he tries to save money on the chauffeur by getting not a real chauffeur but sort of a garage mechanic to do it. It's like, yeah, but the chauffeur is like, again, he's stealing from him. He's like sabotaging the car, so he has to spend more time in the shop and so on. Like it's it's that's the sort of thing. Like he spends money on things that are worth, and he actually does spend a lot of money on drinks. For his own drinks, but also just like, he's in the mood, he'll just stand the whole bar of strangers, just like, yeah, 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 here's a drink for everybody. On me. It's like, what a stupid waste of money. But it's like he's
Well,
not,
yeah. Well, I think
just
that
because
like
he's
the
miserly doesn't mean he's good with money.
well, I think it's related. I think everything you said is correct. I would say that the substances for him, how do I put it? It's like it lets him have some breathing room from himself. Like he gives the sons the alcohol. He's able to be honest and lets himself admit he's stingy. Like there is something for him about alcohol that lets him like, you know, not escape from himself, but something, I mean, something like that. But what that means is that he winds up being less terrible. Whereas for there's an inversion there with Jamie, right? For Jamie, it means he can be more terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, I'd have to reread it to get his exact relation, but just one more
Yeah.
bit of like his the fact he's a skin flint is it's worthless. Is just the
Yeah.
whole bit with the whiskey. They keep every time somebody takes a drink from the whiskey bottle, they pour in more water.
So they're
Um,
just making diluted terrible whiskey. Like it's just
yeah,
ruining everything.
yeah. But what's great about it is like the father is like the reason why they put the water in is because the father is always checking where the line of the whiskey is. Um,
Right.
and it's like, all right, well, your eagle-eyed attention to the whiskey has resulted in no change. It just results in you now have crappier whiskey.
Right. Yeah, that was great. And I think that's a token, another example of what you're saying, where his like the things he's clinging to, whether it's like a symptom or whatever, or character trait or whatever, they're not doing the thing he thinks they're doing. Because he's so pathologically like, oh well, I can't be poor. We have to turn out the light, and
that was one that was really great, and
it was great. And Edmund is like, bro,
like turn
you're
out the lights. Like if we left the light on in the hall, all it would cost is one drink of alcohol a night, and it's like well, given how much he probably drank that night, it's like, well, that's nothing.
yeah,
Um,
it was like he can't, again, nothing but sincerity as far as the eye can see.
yeah, it's really God. I mean it's wonderful, it's marvelous. Just the hideousness of it. Just that atmosphere of dishonesty you could stick a knife through. And it's because there's depth to it and there's complication. Like it's not just that these people are bastards. It's yeah, but there's something really good about him too. Like the father really did want to be an actor, and he does sort of come off as dignified at moments. And Jamie is actually a clever bastard with a certain
Oh
like
no, I
genuine affection for other people. And the mother does have like these sort of delicate dreams and like girlishness at times. And it's like it's horrible. It's horrible.
no, it's true. It's true realism in the sense of like I can point to people in my past who fit all the categories. Like it's like they're so real that it creates this type of art that's very painful, where it's like, oh no, these are the types of everyday struggles that people have. Like, and the far opposite example is there's a terrible novelist who I love reading because he's kind of good bad named Gula Crudi, and he has a character who, if I remember right, it was a lady who was pining after a man for years, and the man finally said yes, and so she was so overjoyed that she committed suicide out of joy. And it doesn't make sense. It's stupid. It's the dumbest writer ever because it's just pure romantic fantasy. Like it's like if you put Eugene O'Neill here, this other writer would be over here. Of like these are just mythical beings with no connection to reality. Whereas I think that of the stuff we've read, O'Neill is, I would say, on the far end of like no, I actually like I know people in life. There's a
No, no,
disconnect.
like
You know
there's
what I
a
mean? Like it's more realism in the sense of like, no, this is really real life.
yeah. I mean, it is just so impeccably created.
Yeah.
I guess like I recently a couple weeks ago I watched a movie called Lost Weekend, which is like one of these or, film noir movies, and it's about this alcoholic and his decline downward. And it's like, okay, it's sort of hitting like different things alcoholics do, like pawning money and lying and hiding alcohol while they're drunk and not knowing where it is later. Like that's like it has these things, but it doesn't have the sense of spiritual sordidness of just like the deep ugliness and dishonesty that goes into Vice. Yeah, yeah, bits of it. I think last weekend, it's not a movie I recommend exactly, but it has virtues. Um, but it's but like this is something like no, this really is a slice of life. This is, I mean, it's just and it's so essentialized, so utterly rich. It's slice of life in the best possible sense of the word.
Yeah. So I think one thing to think about as we go forward is this is just me free thinking a little bit. Um, which is that I think some of the more romanticized art that I like or that just is out there has a different view of fantasy.
Well, that's a consistent in realism, well,
Mhm.
with realist naturalist writers, fantasies are a pipe dream, or there are no dreams, there are only pipe dreams. um and that's like that's what you find with Flaubert. Is like a very like, clear example of like Madame Bovary. It's like it's one disillusionment after another. um in
Same in Balzac. Balzac's hard because there's aspects of him that are purely fantastic, but Lost Illusions, the novel, is the same way. It's a losing. There's different. All the structural moments are hinging around the phrase. He went through his lost illusions. Like he loses his illusions.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I mean that's one thing in the with Balzac, it's like pronounced. People have these intense, violent passions they pursue, and they get hurt because of that.
Yeah,
It's actually bleaker with Flaubert because at least with Balzac, there's a sense of the value you're pursuing would be worth it if it could stop hurting you so badly. Um,
Well, I
but with
don't. I
Flaubert,
think no, I don't. I think it's a little different. But go on. Tell me with Flaubert.
At least sometimes. I
Yeah.
guess with Peregorio, like he wants, like there's things he loves. I'm not gonna spoil the book because it's like set up for it, but there's things he loves, and if he could just if they could just be nicer to him, like he could be genuinely happy. With Flaubert, it's like no, you get the girl, you get the guy that you want to be with, and you find out he's a brutal person. You get another guy, and he's a coward. You try to make things work with your husband, but he's a fool. Like
Yeah.
there are no values in this life that are worth it. Like it's all just vapor. And that's very much kind of what you have. But let's talk about like a dream. Be like, we're talking about Edmund when he's like having this big, because he actually has a vision. There
Yeah.
actually is something positive with him, and I actually got the section right here where he's just talking about what he like when he's on a boat one day, and he just says, and several other times in my life when I was swimming far out or lying alone on a beach, I've had the same experience. Became the sun, the hot sand, green seaweed, anchored to a rock, swaying in the tide, like a saint's vision of beatitude, like the veil of things that they seem drawn back by an unseen hand. For a second there is meaning. Then the hand lets the veil fall, and you are alone, lost in the fog again, and you stumble on towards nowhere for no good reason. It was a great mistake my being more than a man. I would have been much more successful as a seagull or a fish. As it is, I will always be a stranger who never feels at home, who does not really want and is not really wanted, who can never belong, who must always be a little in love with death. Like that's his.
But also for him, the fog is
Well,
a
he says in the next
right.
passage, as as in like his father says, yes, there's a making of a poet in you, all right, and he responds, just slightly later, I just stammered. That's the best I'll ever do. I mean, if I live. Well, it will be a faithful realism, at least. Stammering is the native eloquence of us fog people. So like the
What does
fact
he
that
mean by fog people there, do you think?
well, as in like all of them. Like Jamie can be eloquent at moments. The
Yeah.
Tyrone can be eloquent about like what it meant to him when that actor approved of him.
Yeah.
His the we end on the haunting images of the wife, as she's remembering what it was like to be a girl and to just want to be a nun. Like that's haunting. Like it has that stammering eloquence, and that's what they all have as fog people.
I think there's also a sense that like realism for Edmund is not discounting fantasy, isn't discounting fog or saying there is no fog, because it's just all there is material. There's no fog. The more intelligent point that he makes is that like how do you not get swallowed by it? Like the mom gets swallowed by the fog, or there's a sense in which he acknowledges its power but
Well,
has more tools to deal with it, maybe, or
well,
something like that.
the thing is like there are moments of a real vision,
Yeah.
and then the fog comes back in. Then all the self deception, then all the tedium and ugliness of life comes in. I think that is part of it. Is then the hand lets the veil fall, and you are alone, lost in the fog again. And you stumble on toward nowhere for no good reason. So it's like no, sometimes the fog peels back and you're a realist and you see things like they are, and it's truly magnificent. You
Very
are.
Nietzschean, very Nietzschean point, by the way. There is a sense in Nietzsche that like the purest joy is when you don't imprint on the things in reality, when the things are just let to presence themselves, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's a more a very modern term for something like that is it's like a flow state. of
Yeah.
like you're not thinking about yourself exactly, at least in any kind of neurotic self-conscious way. It's like no, you're just engaged with whatever activity you're doing, programming, writing, doing music, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of thing that you have there. It's like, yeah, like you are one with. I mean, you become the sun, the hot sand, green seaweed anchored to a rock, swaying in the tide. Like, yeah,
It's like when you're in a flow state, you're not really concerned with your image or ego, or you're just in the task or whatever it is that you're doing, or for me, be like composing or writing. It's like you're just kind of, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. Like, wasn't like a writer in a room. Let's imagine like a giant ballroom. God, this is from something. And like the really pontificatingly writer has his gigantic thing in the middle of the room where he has his typewriter set. The real writer has something in the corner so there's no distractions, and it's just.
I remember like the worst thing was like in the Possessed, Dostoevsky's
Uh-huh.
Possessed. Dostoevsky hated Turgenev. I don't think this is a fair attack on Turgenev at all, but when
Okay.
he describes this character that's sort of meant to be the Turgenev, and there's it's described that he wrote a description of a ship sinking and all the chaos and horror of women and children losing their lives, etc.
Yeah.
And but the sense that you got from reading it was look at me, the author, who has such a deep heart, able to recognize and sympathize with their plight. Like that is the
Yeah,
most
yeah.
neurotic, toxic version of anti-flow you could have. Um,
Yeah.
you're like, no, I'm not talking. Like, no, this essay is not about the tragedy of the ship. It's about how profound a person I am for recognizing the tragedy. Um,
I love that. It's, there's similar statements between so Tchaikovsky and Brahms hated each other as well.
Mhm.
Um, and there's similar statements of like one of their romanticism is authentic and the other one is performative, and they kind of go back and forth, and it's funny. The rivalries are great because now we look back and we go, I mean, your Brahms and your Tchaikovsky, like I think it's fine. Your rivalry doesn't matter
Yeah,
that much.
it's like weird, like some of these artistic rivalries are weird, like Ingres versus Delacroix. As painters of like, okay, Ingres is linear, Delacroix is painterly, and it's like, I mean, guys, there's a difference here, but why are you hassling each other? Why can't you just feel there's two different ways to paint? Um, but yeah, so I find that it's hard to get into the headspace of like opposing one or the other.
Yeah.
Uh, there are oppositions that make more sense in the history of art, but that one doesn't to me. Um, but yeah, I mean, just so like, I just want to like, it is it is interesting to me, and really profoundly important. Actually, just the vision of reality that these profound experiences that Edmund has. And this is a common thing you find with a lot of naturalist writers. Is Yeah, they are very much aware of the pettiness and self-deception within humanity, and probably in their view, inescapably in humanity. Um, but they also know about how wonderful the world is. So, uh, there's this simultaneous world worship, awe, sublimity that goes into it, and you find that with a lot of these guys. Like Zola's that way. Like there's yeah, his characters are vermin generally speaking, but there are just moments in his work that it's like, well, this is a world of gods right here. Like just the mines in Germanau or Earth and Zabel Earth, or so on. Like there's something truly magnificent. Like Sherwood Anderson has that quality too. And a
Well,
lot.
yeah, and I also think that the some things that go along with that viewpoint are hand in hand with proto-existentialist viewpoints, which is that look, you can't change your feeling, but you can change your feeling about the feeling. you can you can rise to meet yourself. And some of his characters do. Edmund accepts the truth of his mom, at first denying it a bit, but then accepts it. And yet there is a sense that other characters are not up to that sense of clarity or
Yeah.
challenge. They're not willing to like change. Because I mean, like, okay, so
Oh,
like an alien shows up and goes, it's interesting, humans are like changing all the time, and yet each individual human has very wrong viewpoints about change. Like we're very malleable in a sense, would be the more factual answer, and yet it's very hard for people to see that in O'Neill's fictional landscape.
yeah. I agree with. I'm sorry. Could you just say that one more time? Just quickly summarize it.
Well, I guess my belief, maybe not an alien showing up to Earth belief, is that the human experience is very malleable, that an individual can change.
Oh no, I don't. I don't think O'Neill thinks people can change. No, I don't think O'Neill believes in that one bit. Um, and I mean that's partly because of other like
Other plays.
other plays. Like
I
I
don't
get
think
that
that
feeling,
Edmund.
but just the fact that like just like that even Edmund is like, yeah, Dad's gonna send me to this crap sanitarium, whatever. Yeah, Mom's an addict, whatever. Jamie's a jackass, whatever. Like there's no
Uh,
moment of come on, let's actually do something about this. Let's actually make a change. It's like no, like maybe a long time ago we would have set out to do resolutions. Maybe a long time ago we would have had like a heart to heart and made plans. But we're past that. We're past that. This is just life. Um
that was last season.
yeah.
No,
No,
that's a good point. I
um
think that I think there's a conflict though in between how he views his characters go and maybe how I experience the message as a reader. Because for me, at the finishing line, when I say like, okay, like nothing but sincerity all around, I then internalize in my own life a reversal. Like, no, you can change, you can do this, you can do all
yeah,
these things.
yeah, as
I
in
don't
like
know if you
well,
experienced it
like
the same
that's
way.
how I feel too. Like
Okay.
I think change is possible. I think we can like change our lives. I mean, I don't know, there are some people who are so screwed up that no, like Trump can't redeem himself. Um
Well, even if he did, we would never believe him.
like no, like you can do things so horrid that like no, you're just the first step at redemption would be suicide.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
No, but I think
but,
like
I
the
think
effect
like
of reading this
yeah,
tragedy is
but
about
in general, it's like no, like I look at this and I feel like yeah, I know what that feeling of powerlessness can be like. I know
right.
what that feeling of that's just the game we're playing here. I know that feeling of like not actually dealing with the truth. So like for me, it's like I recognize this is an aspect of human experience. This is a major thing that goes through people's lives and through my own life to an extent, but I don't think it's the fundamental. I don't think it's the essential.
Yeah.
I don't look at this play and say that's life, honey. Um, um, I'm sorry, I had a girlfriend who used to say that. You know, that's just life, honey.
That's life, honey. What was she like from South Carolina?
No,
That's ironic.
she was from China. Um,
Similar. Just kidding.
yeah, I don't know. I guess I
No,
guess.
I think I by the way, that would be an interesting. I think that is the difference between an epic and a. I think that when you read, you know, William Gaddis's The Recognitions, which is 12,000 pages, or all the or War and Peace, or these gigantic ones, I think there is a sense that they are trying to say what the whole is, but I
No,
don't.
I think O'Neill. I mean, this is getting into a broader question, which is worth interesting to discuss of like how much of an artist's attitude towards life is conveyed in any given work.
Yeah,
Like something like War and Peace, that really is like, yeah, we're dealing with beggars and we're dealing with Napoleon. Like we got the whole gamut of
yeah. I
human
mean,
society.
Life
Um,
and Fate by Grossman opens with a prisoner of war camp, and you have every character from the all facets of life introduced as in the same war camp, and you're like, oh, this is a metaphor for the whole freaking world. Okay, that's the scope of what we're dealing with, but that's not what we're dealing with here. We're
yeah,
dealing with
it's
more laser
yeah.
beam focused intervention
I
into
mean,
life.
I would say that even with a short work where it's like, okay, like this is just one family, one middle class, semi well off, maybe slightly upper, barely upper class family, something along those lines. Um, and it's like, okay, it's very much this corner, but this is the corner of reality that Eugene O'Neill feels is important. And
Yeah.
even though it's like it is sociologically narrow, you would say it's still. I think it's still like no, he carries that attitude of helplessness from bums at a bar to the president.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as we're using words like sincerity or authenticity, I think we're speaking more universally.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't think like because I don't. I mean, how would it work if we can't use those words in this play? I don't even know how to talk about this play if I can't use those words because it's so wherever there is life, there's going to be self deception.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me but one paranoia I always have when I read an author,
Mhm.
is, oh yeah, okay, I got a feeling for their attitude towards life in this work, but are they gonna like just like surprise me, like sucker punch me in a different work, and I'm gonna have to completely rethink what my attitude is towards them. I have to say I don't think that's ever happened to me. Um, I would say I'm surprised sometimes at like the way it comes out, but authors usually all their work is cut from the same cloth. Um,
Reminds me of there's a quote from Heidegger where he says, "All thinkers have one thought."
yeah, yeah,
Doesn't mean we all have one word, but you have a thought, and that thought might require 90 volumes to say.
yeah,
That's kind of
yeah. I
similar
mean,
to what you're
it's
saying.
yeah, like it's like in like, like someone like Camus. It's like his three novels I read by him. It's like they're all very very different, but it's like yeah, but this is the same world. This is the same sort of, I don't know, concern with simple-hearted straightforwardness, sometimes in a very negative capacity, but the
Well,
same thing.
I think the only one I know who would maybe be a little different is Fernando Pessoa, because Fernando Pessoa wrote under three heteronyms. One of the heteronyms is like a spiritualistic, morbid guy who kind of writes like Schopenhauer, but one of them is a Christian. And but still there is still some through line. So I'm not even that. I might still be on your page. You might still find an author.
Yeah, it's, I mean, like it's weird. I mean, sometimes writers change over time, but even then it's like Hauptmann, like he begins his career as a very definite naturalist and later on becomes a symbolist. But even then it's like he's still dealing with these sort of soul body dichotomies, even in his works of hardcore naturalism. Like it's not, it's still there. It's
Right. And you could even say that with Fernando Pessoa, the elephant in the room is the elephant in the room. The obsession with identity and subjectivity is the through line between all the authors. There's still a sense of tying thread. All of this is to say that we're on the same page about the death of the author. There's
Yeah,
no, the author is this local point where everything hinges. I think there's a
author
couple.
is very much alive. We're saying. Um,
I think there is one or two areas where I might convince you it doesn't apply.
oh yeah, well, we'll get into that, but
Youth is
okay,
the first one.
go for it, man.
I'm just going to go for one. Youth. There are numerous composers,
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
youthful works, and that's why youth is such a great time to find their art, because you get to see them seething themselves into
No, no,
existence.
I would wholly and unambiguously. That was something I was thinking of is that, well, just in general, like people change over time,
Mhm.
um, and there is a degree. Like sometimes it's like it's only a superficial change, but other times it's like no, like this man late in life is a fundamentally different person. I mean, okay, like the one of the worst examples you could probably bring up for a reason is like the painter George Brock of uh, he starts off as a modernist painter, and he still stays a modernist painter later on, but the stuff after the First World War is very different, in part because he had a head injury. Like
Yeah,
it's just so
I
much
mean,
more
we talked about
murky,
that name. I
ugly,
was like,
and
you're
gross.
right, but for mean reasons.
Yeah, okay, so I don't want to use that one. That one's unfair. Like, I mean, like Picasso is one who like goes through a lot more changes, but I don't know. You look at it, it's still Picasso.
Here's a real example in music, and then we can be done. This has been great though, and
Yeah, yeah,
the stuff we're
they're
talking
right.
now is actually still interesting, I think, for people, anyone listening. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a composer Rockberg who started
No,
off.
no, they just want to hear about Eugene O'Neill. All this literary aesthetic theory, they don't give a shit about. They're fucking fuming right now. They're about to get just get the worst shit posts in a
And
minute.
we're gonna get
We need to
the
stop. We
torches.
need to save this podcast. No, go on.
So
Go on.
so George Rockberg was a modernist composer in the vein of Schoenberg and Webern. Total serialism, very angular, very dissonant, very fascinating rhythms. And then, if I remember right, his son died, and he became a neo-romantic. He said I couldn't express what I was feeling using the language I had. And I think that the other category I would say is when some real has to be deeply traumatic or just big thing happens to people, sometimes they change fully. The head injury, the son dying, World War II as a thing, there's
Yeah. Okay.
Holocaust.
Another one is
Yeah.
sometimes just I don't know, like not being mentally ill anymore, as in like
Yeah.
that's the Chirico. Like he had a schizoid personality disorder like during the period of time where we care about the Chirico as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
During the early, like the 19 teens. And then he stopped having the anti-epiphanies. And he became a neo-baroque painter and fine, respectable work, nothing that notable exactly, but fine. And of course, his surrealist friends detested that. Um, and out of out of upset, he actually did auto plagiarisms where he would paint in his earlier style and then sign it as if it were from 1910. Um, and I've seen some of
Yeah.
them.
Okay.
There's one at the National Gallery that's currently on display, and it's just like, yeah, this isn't as good. This auto plagiarism here, it's not. It's kind of crap. Um,
Beautiful.
like, I can
Okay.
tell it's a forgery. Um,
That's funny.
yeah, it's and terribly tragic. Yeah, but it's
Well,
so.
a lot of the examples we've given include a tragic element because one side of the ball is infinitely more aesthetically valuable. You know, Edvard Munch, if I remember right, wound up painting like landscapes and flowers by the end of his life. There's a sort
Um,
of
no, I don't. I mean, he did do more landscapes at the end, but
did he
that
kind of always keep his edge?
I think that yeah, it's not quite as good as the Scream, but I think it's fully respectable.
Okay.
In a way that like no, this belongs in museums, this belongs in retrospectives.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's not like George Mean, the sculptor George Mean,
Mhm.
who had his big heyday in the 1890s with these really wonderful kneeling youths. They're some of the greatest sculptures of the 19th century. Really touching stuff. I always, whenever I go to the New York, I have to see the ones they have at the Neue Gallery. Um, Wonderful stuff. He but by the time he died in the 1940s, people thought he had been dead for decades. Um, Poor bastard. Um, but anyway, all right.
Alrighty.
So on the whole, Eugene O'Neill. I mean, this is just, it's
What is
just raw.
the literal? What is traumatic about O'Neill is the content.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's like this is almost a tautology. Trauma is traumatic.
I mean, it's yeah. Actually, well, this is what we talk about. Is trauma is something that gets you out of your standard habitual conceptions of life.
Yeah,
And, and here it's like we are having nonstop trauma of people breaking out and admitting, like, yeah, I am a skinflint. Yeah, I am like a really mean fucker who's going to wreck your life, brother.
yeah,
I really am like, and just, and also just like hiding behind, their self deception. Like with the mother, it's like, it's horrible. But yeah, like this is a work that's it's not exactly dear to me, but it is an incredibly profound, delightful, fascinating work.
I
Uh,
found it the same way, and I'm going to be giving it away tonight.
Giving it
It's
away?
Oh yeah, I have a friend who I think would like it.
Okay.
But what I mean is that like Saving Private Ryan or other couple, it's like well, that was hard to watch and fantastic, and I loved it, and I'm gonna give that away now. I don't know if I can read that one again at the moment.
Yeah, that's I don't I mean the most extreme version of that for me is Requiem for a Dream. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Same
very
way.
happy I watched that movie. It was fucking great, and it was the worst fucking thing I've seen in my life. So I
Yeah.
don't want to experience that again.
Same thing with for
Um,
me, Antichrist, Lars von Trier film with
mhm.
Willem Dafoe. I'm good.
Yeah, it's like I'm a broader person for that.
Yes.
Um, and we're done here. But no, this is actually is a play I would reread in a couple of years. I'm certain. I'd be happy to like read this every year for a class I was teaching or something.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, all right. So it's been solid, Chris.
Wonderful. Very
Yeah.
fun.
All right. So I guess we'll do you doing Tennessee Williams next week. A Streetcar Named Desire. Whenever that.
And I think we're gonna read that one, but I think we should spend a couple minutes when we're doing that one comparing the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, at least a little bit, because there's going to be a lot of similarities,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
want to find differences.
Yeah. Like that's going to be a rich. I was actually when I was thinking of the show, I think we do more like this flat out comparisons of works, like episodes like that, and we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't feel we. It's a good idea to do that because we have already too much to talk about with the work. I
It's
mean,
shorter works.
yeah, but this is a work I feel positive affection for, and I'm hoping Williams lives up to that.
It
All right,
will. All right.
I'm hoping. I'm hoping. All right,
It
talk
will.
to you later, man. Bye.
Bye, Ray.